Hello and welcome back to, or for the first time, to the channel. Hopefully you enjoy what I'm going to be talking about today, which is some of my favourite books of all time. I'm a few episodes into this kind of series now, and that is of talking about my favourite books, as I just said, but combating 10 each time. So today will be my 50th favourite book all the way to my number 41st favourite book. And eventually we'll get to number 1. We're getting much closer now. After this, I will be halfway through, as I started at quite the random number of 80. Didn't make it quite to 100. I thought I'll just include my very, very, very favourites. It kind of drops down a little tier after. I know, I'm a bit strange how I stopped at 80. But yeah, let's get straight into what this video is about. And books are far more interesting than me yapping on about other things. So yeah, I will start with my 50th favourite book of all time. And that is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This was shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction, I believe, a year or two ago. And it's very different from what she's also written, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, I hear, as I've not read it. But yeah, this is much shorter as well. And yeah, this is told in the epistolary form, so it's formed by the diaries of our main character. There are only 2 characters in the majority of this book, so it's very strange and different there. And Susanna Clarke makes quite a few bold and confident choices that, in my opinion, really pay off. Part of the brilliance and the joy of reading this book is the utter unpredictability, so I really recommend going in blind. And I won't say too much about the premise or the plot, as I said, that may take away a bit from the joy of what I had when I was reading it. But what I will say is that there is a mystery in this. We're in a bit of a hidden mystery, like fantastical area, which it's pretty empty, as I said, only 2 main characters. And yeah, that mystery adds a sense of suspense. Wow, that was hard to get out. A sense of suspense and also a bit of dread overarching the tone and atmosphere as we travel through the goings-on of our character as he goes through his diary entries to piece together what is going on. It's told in a very languid and efficient way that really captured me, and I love how the story comes together, and it feels like there is far more depth and a lot more to dive into than the page count may suggest. Next up in the number 49 spot, we have The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. This is a Bildungsroman by one of my favourite authors. He is great at those coming-of-age stories. And yes, with this, The Graveyard Book, I think he does an absolutely superb job. So the premise is that a man named Jack, has come in and murdered a family, but a toddler has somehow walked out and avoided getting killed and murdered by him. And that toddler goes to a graveyard, and the ghosts of that graveyard agree to raise him. So yeah, he is he's got quite a varied education as he grows up, because there's people who died when the Romans were still in Britain. So yeah, quite long ago, and they may have a different sense of what is important to educate a young boy about. But yeah, this is about his formative years. It's essentially a group of short stories which really come together in the end in a combination that links to the beginning, as we see how Bod, he's called Bod as it's short for nobody. We see him as he grows up. He learns a lesson almost in every single chapter, and I really love how it's told in that way. It's another one of his little adventures. He's a great character, very intriguing, very engaging, and I love how he interacts with these ghosts of the graveyard and how they treat him, and how you see that they really do care about him, and also how they argue about what he should be taught about, because they are hundreds of years in age difference, and it's just really interesting, that dynamic. And it is an homage to The Jungle Book, The Graveyard Book, so yeah, that's enough, but also obviously being raised by a group that you're not usually raised by, so not animals in this sense, but ghosts. And I really love how quirky Neil Gaiman's writing is, and he really brings in strange facts and names and things about real life, and he really just applies a meaning to them in his books. If you've read it, you will know what I mean by that. But yeah, I really enjoy this. It's quite thought-provoking, written so it's accessible to young adults, but also I think there's a lot there for adults as well. I listened to it on Audible earlier this year. I think it was this year anyway, or it may have been last year, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. Neil Gaiman narrates it himself, so yeah, if you want to check that out, definitely do. I really recommend it. In the number 48 spot, I have Bloodsong by Anthony Ryan. This is his fantasy debut, and it is about a man named Vaden Alsorna who is left at the gates of the 6th Order as a child, and they train the warrior elite. So it's about him being in that warrior school, and it really does that trope on training schools absolutely brilliantly. And yet this is a chronicler's tale. It's cyclical. It is Valen telling the story of his life as we see that he's a prisoner in the present day. So he's saying how he grew up, his formative years, how he was trained, the people he was with, and he has got one half of a story to tell. Wow, it's incredible the stuff that he goes through, and he's an absolutely brilliant character, iconic in the fantasy genre now, and I think that Anthony Ryan does a brilliant job of really crafting this relationship with those around him that really links into the world around him, and it really pushes that plot forward as well. But it's a character-driven story, and if you've watched any of my previous videos, you will know I'm a character-driven reader, and yeah, Valen Alsorna has gone down in one of my favourite characters of all time. In the number 47 spot, I have Holy Sister by Mark Lawrence. This is the brilliant culmination of the Book of the Ancestor trilogy, and as I said in a previous video where I talked about Red Sister, the main character has similarities to Wolverine. So really that's all you should need to know to dive right into this. But yeah, I can't say too much about the plot or premise because, as I said, this is the finale. But I absolutely love how this wraps up. And there's a lot of twists and turns along the way, but it really ends in a satisfying conclusion. Nona Grey has gone down as, along with Valen Alsorna, as I said, of Bloodsong, as one of my favourite characters of all time. Mark Lawrence brings together the plot, world, character development, everything through his stripped back, beautiful prose, which he uses so efficiently. And yeah, you can just tell that he is a master of the art of writing. And Holy Sister is one example of that, and I definitely recommend it to anyone who loves fantasy. And going into the number 46 spot, so yes, we're almost halfway through, and claiming that spot is Later by Stephen King. So yes, this is a more recent Stephen King release, quite short. It's been labelled as crime. It's got crime aspects. I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. But first off, the premise, this is about a boy who can see dead people, but with the caveat that he can only see them shortly in the first few days after their death. So obviously inspired a bit by Sixth Sense there, but it's very interesting as this boy is growing up, is taking us through his formative years. Stephen King really is brilliant at infiltrating the mind of a child, a teenager growing up, and their relationship with their parents, because at the heart of this story, there are two main things really. There's a relationship with his mother, who is a single mother, who you can tell really loves her son, but she's struggling herself, and that relationship is done really beautifully. And the other side is also him coming to terms with this gift or curse, depending on his perspective and what is going on at the time, of being able to see dead people, because that is quite a responsibility. He can't tell anyone, as his mother knows that if he does, he'll be ostracised, so she tells him not to, and so obviously that brings on its own sense of loneliness. And as this book evolves, you see it's not quite as simple as it seems, and it really does culminate in a crescendo of an ending which is really engaging. And I really love this. I thought it was really brilliantly written. Stephen King on great form here, and yeah, as I said, it does have that heart of those relationships, and it doesn't quite fit into the crime genre or the horror genre either. It really is an entity within itself. Stephen King is not scared of making his own book. He doesn't have to remain in those boundaries. It's got a little bit of everything in there, and Later is really great, I'd say. If you've not read any Stephen King, I've not read too much, but this is a very accessible, easy read, and it's quite short as well. In the number 45 spot, I have No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy. If you've watched any videos in the past on this channel, you know that I think he is an absolutely exceptional author, and No Country for Old Men is no exception to that rule. So yes, this is the number 45 spot, and this is a book filled with symbolism, tension, and villainy in bountiful amounts. So yeah, this is a brilliant book, and it harkens to that kind of southern gothic vibe, which I believe is also present in his Border trilogy, which I've not read yet, but definitely need to. But yeah, so this is set on the American-Mexican border, and there's 3 points of views, 3 perspectives, and one of them, Moss, is a man who stumbles across the aftermath of a criminal gang shootout, and he finds a huge sum of money, and he decides to take it and go on the run. The second perspective is an assassin, a man hired to find Moss, and his name is Chigger, and in the film No Country for Old Men, he is played by Javier Bardem, and he is absolutely terrifying. Cormac McCarthy has a way of creating villains, antagonists who are absolutely terrifying in how evil they really are, and in this sense it's because he's amoral. He does not nothing affects him. He will do anything to reach his goal, but he doesn't seem to take joy from anything either, so he's pretty scary in his unpredictability as well. But yeah, so he's hired to find Moss and kill him and bring the money back. And then we've got a third perspective who is more of the philosophical side of this book, and he is Sheriff Bell, and he is tasked with finding out what is going on. He is shown the crime scene of the criminal shootout, but it's after Moss has been, and he's lingering a bit behind these two characters. He sees what is going on, the trail that they leave behind them, what Moss and Chigga leave behind them. And he is an aging sheriff, and he's got this heavy sense of duty, this weight on him. And he's really talking about how the world is changing, and it seems to be descending into madness and chaos. And it is pretty oppressive and scary in that sense, that there are some thoughts here of how the world is just getting worse and worse. So yeah, it's not light-hearted in the least, and yeah, I would highly recommend reading this and watching the film. The film was pretty truthful to the book. There's a few scenes that they changed, so there's a bit more flesh in the book, as there always is. But yeah, I really enjoyed No Country for Old Men. It's brilliantly written, really engaging, and the first book I actually read by Cormac McCarthy, so yeah, I absolutely loved it. Before we get into the number 44 spot, I also want to say that with this, that it is rife with symbolism, but that can be done in books in a way that detracts from the story, bringing it to what the overall didactic messages are. But this is done in a way that really enhances what is going on. It makes it far more poignant as we see what the Sheriff Bell is thinking, and then how events unfold. And yeah, it's not a great view on humanity, but it's one that is very interesting to read about and be a part of and follow through the pages. Now on to the number 44 spot, and that is Wings of the Storm by Giles Christian. This is the third instalment of his Rise of Sigurd series, his trilogy. So he wrote a trilogy called Raven, and this is a prequel to that with one of the characters in that book. It's about him growing up, and Sigurd is a boy who, in the first book, there is a quest for vengeance launched. I won't say exactly why or what happens, but yeah, this is the culmination of that journey, and he goes through such an odyssey as he gets a group together, all of whom are seeking similar things, and this is an epic, blistering, sweeping Norse tale of historical fiction that really has something for everybody. It is so epic that it almost feels like fantasy, but at the same time feels so authentic and real and brutal, and it does not shy away from the grittiness of the ancient Norse world. So yeah, that is absolutely brilliant. I think that Giles Christian has lyrical prose that really guides the story along, makes it really easy to read, very accessible to new historical fiction readers as well as old. I think he's got a bit there for everyone. He does a great job at creating that tone and atmosphere that you really do feel like you are in this Norse section of the world. And Sigurd is a great main character who drives this story forward in a way that's really engaging, and you've got that connection with him by this third book that really helps bring forward those heartfelt, touching moments that really pull on the heartstrings. So yeah, that is Wings of the Storm, my number 44th pick, and a fantastic work of historical fiction by an absolutely great author. In the number 43 spot, I have Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney herself. One of my favourite authors. She's written 3 books. I love them all. So, of course, Beautiful World, Where Are You would be on this list at some point. And here it is. Sally Rooney just has a way of writing about normal people. You see what I did there. I won't go as far as trying to work a sentence that says that it's about conversations with friends. But yeah, oh dear, I had to do it. I couldn't resist. I'm sorry. Terrible jokes, but I couldn't resist. But yeah, she manages to have those conversations with friends, family, those you love, and really in the slice of lifestyle of normal people in a seamless and effortless way that shares so much and engages us in such a heartfelt and thought-provoking story. Of particular relevance in Beautiful World, Where Are You, are the themes of identity, purpose, and friendship. This is also a book that looks at the preoccupation of humanity with life, about where we're going next, always having to think about where's the next job, where's the money coming from, where are we going to live, all these decisions which really actually take away from what life is about. And so yeah, it's a lot about that, and also the pressure that puts on younger people, which in part is self-placed but also placed by society, and how people come to grips with that. And yeah, I think that is done really beautifully in a way that can resonate with everyone, no matter what their response to it. Because the brilliance of Sally Rooney is she lets you make up your own mind. She's not shoving her own ideas and perspectives and views down your throat. She gives what these characters believe, but that does not mean that you have to agree with them, because even the friends within this argue with each other. about that, and that is part of the beauty of it. It seems like a real relationship between these characters. And there's one particular scene I want to talk about where these four friends are having an evening together, and you go between the minds of all four at different points. And the way it is done is absolutely brilliant. There's subtext playing into almost every conversation with what is going on and how these characters are feeling at the moment, some of them in pivotal moments of their lives, which will act as a catalyst for what is to come. And you can see the potential repercussions, so there's tension there as well in what is just a small, intimate story of these characters. And yeah, it's just that scene in particular just really pinpoints a lot of what I love about Sally Rooney's writing, that is so insightful, and it really does examine the human mind in a way that feels so authentic and fresh and visceral. So yeah, that is Beautiful World, Where Are You? An author who I read Normal People first, and it was very different from what I usually read, but I fell in love with her writing and that story, and I also love Beautiful World, Where Are You? And in the number 42 spot, I have Golden Sun, the second instalment of the Red Rising trilogy, the original trilogy, because there's now a sequel trilogy. Not quite finished yet, but it will be. And this is by Pierce Brown. It has been a huge hit in sci-fi. I believe it's called sci-fantasy because it's set in worlds away from us, but it's also got some fantastical elements. And so yeah, this is brilliant. I love all the classical references. It's like humanity has done a full sweep back into degrading back into how society was, and a lot of the houses have kind of that ancient Roman Greek feel about them. But yeah, so this is great. I love how society is worked through colours. So each colour represents a class of people who have a certain job. So for instance, the golds are in charge there, the blues are the engineers, the obsidians are warriors, the reds are workers and miners, and so on and so forth. So it's a very rigid structure. And Darrow, our main character, our sole POV, has a dream of bringing down the draconian regime of the golds. And yes, this steers away from book one, is quite Hunger Games-esque in that kind of battle royale kind of feel. And I enjoyed Red Rising, but I didn't love it. But Golden Sun is a step above and beyond, and it is absolutely brilliant. And if this was a video about top 10 endings of all time, this will be at the very highest few for sure, because it is hard hitting. Anyone who has read this will know what I'm talking about, because there's no way you can forget about that. But yes, the stakes are rising. Darrow is being placed in far more danger, and his dream teeters on an edge where everything could collapse or succeed with the changes of just a few decisions or the involvement of a few more people. But yes, there's a lot of tension, a lot of suspense, a fantastic cast of characters. Pierce Brown has a particular strength at dialogue and interactions between these characters, which I absolutely love. And yeah, the third book in this series, Morningstar, I think is also really great. Not as quite as good as here, but still a 4 or 5 star read for me. So yeah, the whole trilogy, in my opinion, definitely worth the read. And Golden Sun, absolutely brilliant. And in the number 41 spot today, taking the final spot in this video, is, drumroll, The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I absolutely love quite a few plays that he's written, but this is my favourite work and craft by him, and it is a brilliant book in my opinion. It's a work of the Gothic. This was written during a period where I believe writers were kind of aiming with a goal, evolving a bit more to be a lot more accessible, and I love how it has that original read, but there are so many layers that expose extra depth that you can really uncover on more and more rereads. There is always something new when you return to The Picture of Dorian Gray. This is a book that really engages with the themes of ego, greed, the finite nature of life and beauty, and it is quite ominous as well. It really tells this tale of a descent into corruption, and it is really interesting following these main characters. Dorian Gray, of course, as the book is named after him, and it also looks at the question of what would we be like, what effect would it have on us if we were immortal, if we could control that. And in short, we wouldn't be very nice, it seems. That's Oscar Wilde's view anyway. And this is really interesting, written pretty beautifully, and I love the arc, the growth of Dorian Gray as a character. He is a young man, very impressionable for sure, and I love how that is exposed and taken advantage of in this book. Oscar Wilde, I think, is a brilliant writer. He really shows a lot in very few words, and this is quite the journey. And it, as I said, there's a tone shift as you go throughout. At first, it's a bit more lighthearted, a bit more probing with what it's talking about, but it's got a lighthearted touch for it. And then, as I said, as this descent into corruption occurs, you really feel the mood darken, and you get more and more engaged and gripped. At least I was anyway. I was gripped, and it's quite an enchanting read as well, one you just cannot avert your eyes to, even though you kind of know what is coming. But yeah, that is The Picture of Dorian Gray. I absolutely loved it. Brilliant book. Oscar Wilde is a fantastic author. So there we go, that is my 50th to 41st favourite reads of all time. Of course, this is utterly subjective. That is what reading is. Part of the beauty of it is that we all love different books. But so yeah, that is my list for today. Number 50 to number 41 in my list. Hopefully you enjoyed a few of these books, or at least you enjoyed me talking about them. Fingers crossed you did, and hopefully I didn't talk for too long. I guess I'll see when I'm editing this video, and hopefully this doesn't happen. What happened last time is that my phone died halfway through filming, so yeah, fingers crossed that hasn't happened either. But yeah, so thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I intrigued you in a few of these books that I talked about. Let me know if you've read any of them, or if there's any videos that you would love to see on the channel. I'll be more than happy to make them if you wish. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Stay safe. William Gwynne.